Yo guys, so today we're going to be talking about natty or not. I'm not going to do a natty or not video, despite what most people would be doing on YouTube. I'm actually going to be assessing kind of what the pros and cons are of natty or not videos and whether or not they're worth your time consuming as a consumer of fitness content. So it's as it says on the tin in terms of what a natty or not video is. It's trying to determine whether someone's physique has been attained naturally or they've had some performance-enhancing drugs thrown into the mix. So opinions really vary widely on this. There is rarely anything used other than subjective kind of photos and things like this. No factual data tends to be provided during these kind of natty or not videos, and they're used to really spark a lot of debate and kind of stir up the fitness community as a whole, and I see them mostly used as a social media strategy for growth. That's what I mostly see natty or not videos used for versus anything else. So I think, first of all, we'll dive into the pros. So I think the first pro is that it can be used as an opportunity to educate if you want it to. So, for example, you could talk through physiques that typically would be attainable naturally, talk about the time course to achieve such a physique, and you could also talk through kind of even, okay, here's some of the natural bodybuilding federations, here's the top elite within that federation, here's kind of the outliers that you could expect some people to be able to achieve. But also you could even go into some of the research studies and look at kind of the low responders to certain protocols and be like, hey, there's people at the other end of the bell curve too, and I'm sure we all know those people that are just not that muscular despite having tried very hard, especially us coaches who have worked with hundreds of people. You have that experience where some people are just way less rapidly growing versus others despite similar levels of effort and diligence to their training and nutrition. So it can be an opportunity to just talk about, hey, there's a bell curve. There's people who are mostly average, and then there are outliers either end. And you could talk again about the time course of realistic expectations, because I think some people get into the gym and they think they're going to be as jacked as this guy that's been doing a decade within months. And for some reason, those clogs don't turn and they don't quite realize, hey, it's a very slow game as a natural. And I think that can provide a great opportunity to educate people about, okay, what's realistic as someone who's not using performance enhancing drugs for most people, and use it as a way to spread that message. It could be used as an opportunity to spread transparency, which I think is generally a good thing. So people are actually know what's going on behind the scenes a little bit. But I think this is quite a challenging one to do. And I can only really think of one scenario where it's actually happened, which is with the Liver King, who was adamant that he was natural, often promoting that his lifestyle is what led to his gains, and that other people might be able to also achieve that. It's kind of what he's espousing by just being and talking about being natural and his lifestyle and selling supplements and that sort of thing. But then we had hard evidence to suggest the contrary to it. And so I do think it's good when these videos come out and can kind of inform people that, hey, like, guys, this is not the truth. So if you have been investing in this person, thinking they're natural, buying their supplements, and they've been using that as a somewhat of a marketing tool for you, be a bit more skeptical about what they're saying, know there's more involved. And I think that can promote transparency. Another benefit to these videos is it just provides an opportunity for people to think a bit more critically. You might see a video of someone who you just thought was definitely natural, and then you're like, oh, people are actually questioning that. And it just makes you think a little bit more critically versus just accepting everything that you see. And so it can actually apply further afield. I think this is something I personally benefited from with the evidence-based space, where it's like, oh, there's actual research, and then people think about things a little bit more critically. You can't just trust what worked for one individual. There's more to it than that necessarily. People are cherry picking studies, and we want to look at the body as a whole versus just one paper that came out. These sort of skill sets. So I think it can provide an opportunity for people to be a little bit more mindful about the consumption of what they're getting online. And as I said at the start, these often spark debate, and I do think they can promote like positive discussion and debate where all the above points that I mentioned get talked about more. So it just kind of grows that further education, skeptical awareness, and transparency potentially. Now moving on to the cons. So the first cons is essentially it's all speculation and opinion based. And so when you incorrectly label someone as enhanced and they're natural, you're essentially spreading misinformation. You're also calling that person a liar. You could say it's defamation of character. These sort of elements are inherent cons within this. Normally, when I see these videos, it's using photos, videos, and just they're not useful forms of evidence, because More useful would be knowing kind of a fat-free mass index, for example, or having kind of photos over time and seeing how quickly have they developed, and even like stage photos against other competitors, things like this, like in rigorous drug tested organizations. Like that would be a more useful kind of thing to look at. But most of the time it's just like, hey, it's one photo or whatever that's potentially been edited, it's under great lighting, really good pump. Whereas when you put that person under normal conditions, it could be very different. They might look distinctly more normal, much more achievable, and you might be thinking differently to that. And like I said at the start, it's essentially all opinion based and it's speculation. And so I think that's inherently a con within it, because no one's, in very rare cases, are people using like hard facts and evidence to accuse someone of anything. And where I said it kind of sparks debate and promotes discussion, I think unfortunately it more often promotes a toxic fitness culture, and it actually promotes like distrust, hostility towards individuals. People end up getting hate comments for something that no one even knows is true. Like, you're lying about being natural. And it's like, no one actually knows that like completely for certain. And I think that's just not inherently a good thing. And I think unfortunately that can also pull away from what I said could be a positive, is that promotion of transparency. It could actually deter people from being open about sharing what's going on in their end, because they're seeing all this hostility against other individuals. And I don't think that's a good thing, that toxic fitness culture. It could definitely be seen as a form of bullying. So I'll define what a bully is, or what bullying is. So it's the repetitive, intentional hurting of one person or group by another person or group, where the relationship involves an imbalance in power. And I don't think it actually always involves an imbalance in power. Quite often it is smaller accounts chomping at the bit up at bigger accounts. I don't know, someone like Matt Does Fitness comes to mind, where lots of people have accused him of using PEDs, or someone like a Matt Ogus, for example, people have accused him. And normally it's the bottom up, but it doesn't always. Sometimes it goes sideways, sometimes it's top down. Like a Greg Dechette comes to mind, where I think he did quite a lot of Natty or Not videos, and he's quite a big account. Maybe it's of smaller accounts, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't use that style of content anymore. It was when he was smaller and it was a bigger account. But I think in every case, it can still have that former application of bullying, where it's that repetitive, intentional hurting of one person. And especially if it is like not true, right? And you're just essentially calling someone a liar, and then you're getting whoever your kind of supporters are, or people consuming your content, are going over to them and then again like kind of shaming them, throwing shade at them. And of course like if it's not true, then you know that as the individual receiving it. But still, if you are someone who finds any sort of importance of what other people think of you, which I think inherently we all do to some extent, it's not a nice thing to feel, and it could harm your brand. It definitely harms your reputation, of course. And I just think that inherently is not a great thing, that it could be seen as a form of bullying. Finally, the thing that I hate about this is it encourages limiting beliefs. And it's, as I said at the start, where it could be used as an opportunity to educate, that there's a bell curve, there's outliers, there's freaks within the world. You only have like one Michael Jordan, right? He was born a gifted athlete and obviously worked seriously hard for it. But inherently, he had the genetics to be just a complete specimen. And just like you get those in bodybuilding. So it's often ignored that there are genetic freaks and there are outliers. And often the person doing the video kind of assumes just an average, or everyone has their genetics and their response. And so inherently anyone bigger or better than them, that's the joke, right? He's bigger than me. He's clearly on roids. Like, yeah, you could have worked doubly as hard for doubly as long, but if you have subpar genetics versus someone with elite genetics, they could still like be better than you. And it isn't just because they're making up the difference with performance enhancing drugs. So yeah, I think it just can encourage limiting beliefs, where then younger individuals see these videos and they're like, like they once aspired to this person because they thought they were natural, and now they're like, they're not even natural. Maybe I should just jump on gear. Like this guy, I don't know, they might look at me and be like, someone's called like Steve, clearly on gear. And they used to look at my content and be like, Steve's been training 15 years and he's like, he had this like pretty average physique at the start, and he's got a pretty decent physique that I kind of aspire to. And now they're like, I can't even achieve that in 15 years, like, because he's clearly on roids. I'm going to start taking something. I think I'm maybe a bad example because I think it's quite clear that I am natural. I would say that though. yeah, I just freaks exist, and I think shooting for the stars is generally a good thing. I do think having some sense of what is likely achievable is also good, but yeah, I still think there's something to this very limiting belief that a lot of people end up developing, which I think is not the best. So it's actually funny running through the pros and cons because quite often they counter one another. Like what looks like a pro could also be a con. And ultimately, actually, to some extent, depends on the person who's providing the information and the route that they wish to go down. And I do think there are some people that are probably better at doing Natty or Not videos versus other people. I think the saying goes, opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one and they all stink. I think there are some people who like have made a few wipes and so it stinks less and they're better informed essentially, versus other people who are just like really ill-informed and don't have a good sense of what's going on. Like, man, I've seen people like, I don't know, Ronnie Coleman doing Natty or Not videos, and he's just like, I don't know, people throw up images of people to him and he's like who's Natty or Not? It's like, man, he's so far from, I don't know what, like he's so far gone from what a natural was that I don't know if he has a sense of being able to kind of talk through it in any sort of sensible way. And it's just kind of an opinion essentially. Like I see so many people, they just do it as an opinion. You throw up images of people, you're like, oh, is it Natty or not? And the way they break it down just isn't to the degree of rigor I think it would need to be useful. And then it's just speculation, like I said. Anyway, so let me try and get into some conclusions. So number one, my biggest problem with Natty or Not videos is that they are all speculation and opinion based. It's like I just said before, opinions are like assholes. So even if someone is very well informed, they could still be wrong. I do think, however, if someone's well informed and they present the video as like if they're well informed, they're not going to go, this person's definitely on gear. They're going to go, based on my assessment on X, Y, and Z, the amount of progress they've made over this period of time, the way their physiques change, the kind of whatever it might be, the degree of muscle mass they have, the level of leanness that they hold, their FFMI, like based off all this like theory essentially, right, of what we could be using to kind of use as evidence to suggest one way or another. Like they haven't done a like rigorous drug tested bodybuilding show, whatever it might be, you know. Based off all of that, I would likely think that they are enhanced. Like that could be used as an educational video, but most people don't present it like that because that's not what gets the clicks, right? Talking about nuance and not black and white things and shades of gray. And also the people that are drawn to this style of content don't tend to make that style of video, right? Anyway, my second one is I do really think it promotes a toxic fitness culture. I can't think of one video that, like a Natty or Not video, that's been positive. Like, I can't think of one that's like, oh yeah, that video really changed the game. It normally just spirals down into negativity of like, oh, that's not achievable, that person's a liar, like bashing them, a little bit of bullying. You know, I can't really think of anything positive about that. Can you? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Right. So I've said all of this. What are my recommendations from like Natty or Not content and how I advise you go about just your kind of journey as a whole? So I think first of all, as you guys are not surprised about this, I say focus on you, focus on doing your best, and you'll get the best results you possibly can. And that's really the most important thing to focus on, because if you start focusing on outcomes and likelihoods, you're taking energy away from the process, which is ultimately what's going to lead to the end result. And just enjoy this shit, right? Life is about kind of trying to enjoy your journey there, right? And if you put your best foot forward, get the best results you possibly can, you can't really be disheartened about that. You've done your best. Second is follow people that inspire you. That's as simple as it gets. Follow people that inspire you. Doesn't have to be anything more complicated than that. Follow people who educate you, people that give you great information. Again, doesn't matter if they're natty or not. If they inspire you, if they give you great information, you're benefiting from that. That's benefiting you and your journey moving forward. And finally, of course, remain skeptical, remain mindful when consuming fitness content. If something sounds too good to be true, and it's like this guy who's like, you could get in my shape just by following my program, and he's like Ronnie Coleman size. Obviously, no one's Ronnie Coleman size. Well, there are a few handful of people in the world who are Ronnie Coleman size, but you know what I mean. If something sounds too good to be true, if you find yourself getting drawn to someone based off how they look, draw it back, be a bit skeptical, look at the information they're providing, all that good stuff. So guys, I'd love to hear your opinions on this. Do you consume Natty or Not content? What do you think to it? Do you think it's overall a pro or a con? within the fitness space. And if you haven't yet, do subscribe. And like I said, drop me a comment and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.